Hey, it's InkdMage, and I'm about to begin a series of videos each week that will go over my Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen campaign, where I give you a recap of what's going on with my characters, give you tips for running this that you may want to use for your own campaign, as well as show you terrain builds and what I did to create the environments needed for the campaign itself. So in the adventure, there are some prelude parts to reawaken the gods for one of the divine characters in the game, or if your game has more than one divine character, there's a trial in there for anyone who's a mage of high sorcery, and then there is kind of a one for everyone called the Scales of War. Now, I decided to just use a couple of those, and I wanted to give this more of an old school Dragonlance feel. And if you have read Dragonlance Chronicles, which I highly recommend if you haven't, the characters in that return to a town they lived in after 5 years of going out and seeking signs of the old gods. They had been an adventuring party previously, they went out for 5 years, and then they came back, and that's where the War of the Lance really picks up in Dragonlance Chronicles. So what I wanted to do was, because early on in Shadow of the Dragon Queen, there is a Kingfisher Festival in the town of Vogler. So I set this opening in a flashback 5 years earlier at the Kingfisher Festival in Vogler. And this was the stage on which the characters would meet. But it wasn't just a place for the characters to meet, it was a place for the characters to meet Ispin Greenshield and be drawn together. And what I did was I created the village setup with plenty of places for them to interact, but I scoured DM's Guild and found adventures and things where people wrote about festivals, and I mined them, I created my own stuff, and I had, I don't know, about at least 10 events for the characters to participate in, not knowing what they were going to do or what they weren't going to do. I had so many, the characters didn't do everything, but that helped provide a sandboxy feel so that they felt immersed, you know, that they weren't just railroaded into like one or two specific events. They had a choice, and they had a choice of people to talk to. But I just wanted to show you that you don't have to follow exactly what the book says. And I encourage that you do something like a flashback, because it always feels better when you're a player or a DM when the player characters meet for the first time and that magic happens. So for a recap, what I opened up with was a description of the events of the world, the state of the world, and the importance of the cataclysm, the importance that the gods have vanished. I really wanted to drill this home with, you know, a narration in the opening leading up to the sad circumstances of them traveling back to Vogler for the funeral of a friend, and which led into the memory of how they first met. Then I transported them back 5 years earlier to where they're at the Kingfisher Festival. And this was really fun. We have in our party right now, there is a female Kender named Dot or Dottie. There is a human wizard named Bolt. There is a human fighter named Corbin, and a Sylvanesti elf named Alicia. And so Alicia is going to be the cleric of the party. And so previously she had no powers. What I did was I ran it actually as a session 0 for the flashback. So like, for example, nobody had a proficiency bonus. Nobody was proficient in any saving throws. The wizard only had cantrips. Everybody had 2 less hit points. And the cleric didn't have any cantrips because his character, she wasn't a cleric at that point. So the Sylvanesti elf, Alicia, had come north to Vogler out of Sylvanesti, you know, at least 5 years prior to the events taking place when the campaign gets its start in present time, with her mother, who kept having visions of a terrible calamity that was going to take place in Sylvanesti. Nobody believed her, but she took her daughter and they fled. So that will come into play later. For those of you who are familiar with the Dragonlance history in the world, you know that Sylvanesti became overrun by dragons, and then in an effort to save the Elflands, the Speaker of the Stars, the leader of the Elvish people in Sylvanesti, he caused great harm to his land. I'll say no more about it. So I had them at 0 level, and that's where they met. The Sylvanesti elf Alicia was taking part in the pepper challenge and won 5 gold pieces worth of peppers, but ultimately missed an important Constitution saving throw, so that later that night really wouldn't be able to get any good sleep because of a tummy ache, and have no, wake up exhausted with, no long rest taken. Corbin was the first to meet Ispin Greenshield, and they joined together in the melee challenge. And the mage had tried the ring toss, but was duped by the dwarf who ran it, Darrigan, and the Minotaur, who was chained. They had conversations with the Seekers, who are the new priests who worship the new gods, who are no gods at all. So they're more like charlatans, and I wanted to get that in because I want that to have greater effect in the next session. And I won't say anything more in case my players are watching this, because I'm gonna tie that in. Now, this is a quick insert video. I apologize for the disruption in the edit, but I forgot to mention this, and I wanted to mention that there was a petting zoo as part of the events for the festival, and it was filled with a bunch of rabbits with a single horn strapped to their head, but there was one that had a true horn, and it was an almirage, a small beast, and at its base of its horn on its forehead was a ring, a magical ring, and so that comes into play later. Keep watching. The petting zoo with the almirage, my wife was playing her Kender, Dottie, and Dottie went chasing after this thing, trying to get it, and ultimately it ran into the arms of the elf, who made a very successful animal handling check. And so Dottie ended up getting the ring anyway, and the almirage went running off. Now, at that point, I had a maid from the Thornwall Keep, Agatha, come racing up, because I had Becklin and the mayor off watching a recreation of the Battle of High Hill. So they weren't around, but there were bandits at the keep stealing, and they needed help. So at that point, I then proceeded over to the secondary table to go back to the present time for the Scales of War. And that's where they're riding down the road, and this actually, I'm sorry, prior to that, I did a dream sequence. So the elf actually fell asleep, which is, in 5th edition, elves have trance, so this is unusual, but I had mentioned this was like a reoccurring thing that was happening with her, and she was having the dream again, and it was this dream where she was at a battlefield, and there was a sound of battle all around, and there was a knight on the ground clutching something that was glowing. And this time she got up closer than ever, and she reached for what the knight was clasping, and he grasped her hand with an iron grip, and then started speaking in an unnatural voice, which was kind of prophesying what was to come for her, that she was chosen by the goddess. And so she woke up from the dream, and then they went on their way, and that's where they heard calls for help, and this young farm boy who was escorting some knight's wagon, he comes running around asking for help, saying there's strange creatures around the bend. He won't go any further, but they come and they find the knight's dead, and these strange, hideous creatures they've never seen their like before, these strange lizard men, which of course are draconians. And so they start having the battle, and when the knight when they're doing that, the cleric to be, Alicia, she sees one of the knights is clutching something in his hand that seems to be glowing. So she, like, immediately, this is like her dream. She kind of ignores the battle, doesn't care that, you know, they're going to attack her on the way. And she goes over and she reaches out and touches it. In which case she is transported instantly over to the area for broken silence. To the others, they still see her kneeling over here by the wagon while the battle's raging on. So it's here that she gets her knowledge from Meshakal herself, is given a gift of a holy symbol. I made it an amulet of the devout, which is a magic item in, you know, the DMG. So you can always look that up. It's a pretty cool item. As well as she got a tome that allowed you know, her knowledge of the history of the religion, and gives a +2 circumstance bonus to religion checks. Now, back here, things were not going you know, super great. Well, actually, that's not true. So in the book, the one Capac is supposed to take one of the baz and go and leave just 2 baz for the players to face. Now, at this point, they're no longer 0 level, they're 1st level. But like, they were handily destroying them, and I really wanted to kill one of the players for story effect. So I had one of the Capacs that said he was going actually circle around and took down the mage, and then slashed him again to take away one of his death saves. Now, at that point, this over here was complete, and Alicia was leaving and walking through the gate when she did. All of that vanished, and she was back here, and she had power. So she did healing word on the mage, which raised him, but he was still on the ground. So the Capac Draconian slashed him twice, nearly decapitating him. It did, and got a crit. So it was like 24 points of damage. So it outright killed him. And my brother was disappointed because it's the 3rd time he's tried to play this character, and he's like, "Well, if it doesn't work, then I'm just gonna play my I'm always gonna play my dwarf fighter that I play." So, but what he didn't know was that I had planned was that, as a proof of the miracle, to be evidence for them, Meshakal had granted the power, and a wave of energy washed over them and resurrected him, a true resurrection. So that was great. So now he's happy that he's back, and then they understand now that the power is in the world. The old gods have returned, and it sparked really good role playing and conversation about what happened and how meaningful it was. Now it's time to go back over here where the characters would face the challenge. So the maid told them that she escaped through the 1st floor hatch leading into the wine cellar, so which led to a watery cave. So they came through the cave, and in the cave there were some giant rats that they faced. And after the rats, they made their way up, but not before the Kender was looking to see if there was any interesting bottles of wine. I threw in that there was Purple Grape Mash number 3 with a label Wizards of Wine Winery, which is, of course, from Curse of Strahd, my favorite D&D campaign. And so somehow that managed to end up in her pouch. And they went upstairs, and there they saw that the bandits were loading up the cart. So this was great because the players, instead of going with their first instinct, which is to become murder hobos, they stopped and they were like, you know what? Like, we don't have to be murder hobos. Let's capture them. So the wizard used a firebolt to startle the horse. Horse kind of reared, dumped the cargo that was being stolen, and raced off 30 feet before stopping. He then proceeded in the subsequent rounds to blast the wheels to make it so they couldn't escape. they subdued almost everybody, and one bandit got away, and the only one they killed was the leader. Now, because they were 0 level, I just used the bandits for their stat block, but I used a Kalaman soldier for the leader. And the leader was he was a former Salamnic knight. All that's left of his armor was a breastplate, and he was dirty. Clearly, hard times had driven him to this. And I just wanted to do that to kind of set the stage that, of the knights, and that they, have fallen into disrepute, but also to do a contrast to the nobility of Becklin, who's been stationed here at Thornwall Keep to protect the town. So at that point they got one magic item. I used it was the blood spear. Now that's from Curse of Strahd. Now you're gonna say, Dan, that's a +2 to hit and +2 damage weapon at first level. Only if it is given specifically to a specific person, which it isn't, but it does have the power of granting temporary hit points. So I wanted to be a little more generous than maybe I have in the past with some magic items. So for example, the ring that they acquired and my wife pocketed, is a ring I made up called the Ring of Face Step, and it allows the wearer to cast Misty Step, and then once the power is used, it can't be used again until a long rest is taken. So little treats along the way. So that was the crux of the adventure. So what happened? It united them. It got them united with Ispin Greenshield. It then set the stage for them to imagine, that they've had 5 years of adventuring and traveling together and doing many adventures with Ispin. And speaking of Ispin, I wanted the players to become endeared to him. I wanted them to know that he was on their side. He was a good guy. And so what I did was during the melee competition where he was in fighting with the fighter Corbin, and with the battle with the bandits, I had him use his reaction to defend the others and impose disadvantage on their attacks, to take his action to help somebody up who had fallen prone. I wanted to really make him a likable person to set up the funeral, which takes place in the next session. And beyond meeting Ispin and bonding with him, they also learned about these strange creatures, the Draconians, and remembered rumors of war that they had been hearing about, which, sets up the story as it develops, because this is a war story. And most importantly, it established the return of the healing, miraculous power of the gods. So I really think I accomplished what needed to be done for this first adventure. Most importantly, the players had smiles on their faces and they had fun, and I hit all those story points. So before I break this down, I'll take you through a little tour, a video tour. First, here were the characters from last night. From here, this is Dottie, the Kender, Alicia, the elf cleric, Bolt, the wizard, human wizard, and Corbin, the human fighter. I used this mini here with a green shield to be Ispin Greenshield. So let's take a look. This is the town circle of Vogler. There's streets that go off leading to other areas, as you can see. But I used a combination of 2D maps and tiles along with 3D terrain. I'll have links in the description for the different companies, but I like to use a wide array of products. Focus. So this was an immersive setup. The players really enjoyed seeing it when they came. Now, you don't have, I've been collecting for years. You don't have to have this. You could draw it out on a 2D map. You could make it smaller. You could do whatever you want. The most important part is the storytelling and the shared experience with your gamers. For Thornwall Keep, I wanted to make sure that I included the gnome flinger on top. That's a WizKids product. And because the keep, the watchtower, that's really the part that's left amid rubble and broken walls, I wanted to include some of those ruins. And little excavation sites where the Knight Becklin is digging up artifacts and relics from the keep's past. This is the watery cave that the characters snuck into the keep. The wine cellar. This is just a recreation of the first level of the tower, which I do have dressed out under there if they wanted to take it off. So, again, you can see the combination of 2D, 3D, some cardstock, some resin, some plastic filament, some PVC, just a wide variety of terrain that brings it all together. So let's go look at this table setup. I tried to make this as much like I could, the image in the book, the campaign book itself. If you're a gamer sitting at my table, this might be your view. You might have to stand up to get a better view. And for the Broken Silence prelude part, see, I used a 2D D&D tile along with 3D terrain and set dressing. I'm really grateful to have 2 tables in which I can do setups. Because I could do, big setup at either table, or maybe like 4 or 5 or even 6 smaller setups for the night. So whether you do a flashback or a 0 level, I just encourage you to do something to introduce Ispin Greenshield rather than just stories later when you're at the funeral. Do something to tie it in to really give some emotional impact and connection early on. I also would say, depending on how well your party builds characters, how well they play, how experienced they are, the scale of war combat, you can jack that up, beef it up. And I recommend intercutting it with the Broken Silence. Go ahead and intercut it, and then hammer them. Kill more. Kill them all if you have to, because they're about to be truly resurrected by the power of Mishakal. Let it be a really definitive moment for them, that they understand something significant is going on in the realm. I hope that you enjoyed this, and if you do, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, and follow me on Instagram for some extra XP.